I didn't make this presentation, the PowerPoint, a whole lot about my stuff other than my current weaving. So and anyhow, I thought the title was appropriate. So I wanted to give you a little bit of history because y'all are docents, and I think that's important for you to know. And so I have a few pieces of each of the historical styles, but not our current ones. They're historic pieces. So, so it's a little bit of history, and then, and I couldn't think of a better way. It felt like when they asked me to do this, I thought it's like, oh my God, I get to talk about what I did on my summer vacation. So that's why it's my COVID vacation. It's I've done a lot, I think, given that this year was peculiar, as I know it was for everybody. But that's what this is going to be. And yeah, I can take questions, although I don't have the chat thing up, and I assume that's the only way I'd see like hands raised or anything. So.
Yeah, people can just unmute themselves if they have a burning question. So definitely just find your mute button and unmute, and people can jump in if they wish. Otherwise, we can have more questions at the end too.
Okay, sounds good. So I know that you folks know where Chimayo is, so I don't have to tell you a whole lot about it. This is a picture from the hill behind our house. So we're at La Centinela, we're Centinela Ranch, and the reason why it's named Centinela is because there are these hills that are allow you to watch people coming in. This is facing towards our little valley, and that's our corral down there. But if you look the other way, then you can see there's a great big arroyo, and that would be where people coming, it's actually was like a road down from, Truchas and that direction from the mountains. So that's where they probably were watching. The other thing we're known for is chili. We've eaten more chili the last year than I don't know what, but chili is the other Chimayo thing. And we wanted to talk about just a little bit that yes, there were people here before my husband's forebears. But there's not a lot in the way of ruins or anything like that around here, but just wanted to mention that. So when the Spanish came here, they brought churro sheep. These are actually sheep. This was taken years ago, but my sister-in-law keeps churro sheep right here at Centinela, and I get first dibs on the fleeces. And so another thing that I've done that I didn't really talk about here is that I've spun probably at least a dozen fleeces over the last year. And so I'm waiting, once I ever finish this piece, and I could start weaving some hand spun again. But anyhow, churro are very tough. It's a tough breed of sheep. They tend to twin. They are really great in our semi-arid environment here. One of the reasons why they've did really well here is because they are supposed to be really great mothers compared to other sheep. So don't know why that matters, but anyhow, and the churro did well, and they became the basis of our weaving industry. And it also was a sheep industry. The sheep were driven down, like down to Mexico for slaughter, and so it wasn't just for the wool. It also was for the meat. This is a little bit of that process. Shearing. this is hand shears. The guy our shearer now comes obviously with electric shears, but this is the basic process. Carding, which I often don't do because I'm lazy. I spin in the grease a lot, but it's most people would call it a necessary step in the process. And spinning is what I spend, I don't know, endless hours doing. And it's very soothing. It's probably the most mentally healthy thing that part of the process. And this is Irvin, who's wandering around here, hopefully quietly. He dyes the yarn. He's the one who does all the dyeing. And we've got a dye shed just across the parking lot from here. So if you ever come up here and visit, it's very visible and obvious. The dye stuffs that we use, so we do some acid dyes, but we also do lots of natural dyes. So Cochineal and the Folk Art Museum did the most amazing show about Cochineal several years ago. Gosh, it's been a while now. But Cochineal does live here, but not in any kind of numbers. You can find it on the prickly pear and occasionally on cholla cactus too. But the stuff in the hand in the middle there is the dried cochineal, which is how we buy it. Chamisa, which you probably recognize, is yellow, does a great yellow. Kota, which that's some dried kota down there on the lower left. The kota dyes a nice kind of an orange shade. You can get, if you make it strong enough, concentrated enough, then you can get to a nice rust color anyhow, but it's basically an orange. The lower middle thing there is indigo. Indigo is something that we dye a lot of. I think it's like everybody's favorite color. Those are, they look like rocks, right? They've already been processed from the Indigofera, probably Indigofera tinctoria. There's a lot of different species of indigo plants that are around different places in the world, but it's processed through a long and complicated process. And this is the form that we buy it from. We have to grind it and then use lye, and then you to make it water soluble, and then you have to use a reducing agent to get all the oxygen out, and then you dye it in that reduced fat and it comes out green, and then you expose it to air and it turns blue. It's like the most magic dye stuff of them all, at least that we use. And then that last one over there is sort of the remnants of some madder root, which is another thing that we can grow here, but not in great quantities, so we wind up buying it. We also use black walnut hulls, and I think that's what else is in there. Anyhow. There are a lot of different things that we use for dyeing, but these are probably our primary dye stuffs. Weaving, and again, that's a picture of Irvin with his scissors in his pocket, which is where they always are. So that's our loom. We weave standing up. It's a 2-harness counterbalance loom, and I don't know what else to tell you. It's a process that I love passionately, I guess, and I teach it, and I've written a book on how to do it after all these years of teaching workshops. So if you're ever interested in that, that's a whole nother thing. But anyhow, in this picture, he's working with a wool silk yarn that Irvin does pretty often. He works in, these are pieces that take him like a year or something. So They're major projects, and he is not working on anything like that yet. So at this point. So we used to, I thought I took this out, but these are all the historical pieces. So I want to go through this fairly quickly because I can spend a really long time on it. Of the Spanish colonial styles, the predominant thing are these striped frazadas, and they are simple blankets. They're mostly woven probably in a double weave, at least in quantity. The vast majority of them are woven as a double weave, and they're striped like that. So what I'm going to do is to show you some of the different styles. We have names for the frazada de boda is a wedding blanket, and our daughter was just married in June, this last June, and Irvin wove her a wedding blanket. He had woven a wedding blanket for our son when he got married too. So this is the blanket in this picture is the one that was given to us by his father's family, actually, the weaving family, to us when we were married. The frazada de campo is more of a camp blanket, so much more of a utilitarian kind of thing. And it's usually based on these undyed colors. So not a lot of color, fairly simple, still just striped. So trade blanket, and here you can see very clearly the line that's in the middle from it being a double weave. Down the middle. I love that I have an arrow. How easy is that? So they come in a lot of colors. As we move into when aniline dyes are available, commercial dyes are available to New Mexico, then you see more colors. But historically, these older pieces are black and white and maybe a little bit of dyed yarn. This has a fair amount of indigo in it, but that is a dye that comes into the area pretty much immediately. The mochi, again, is the same kinds of colors, but it is dominated by these black and blue stripes. So that's what we call mochi, and it is something that is actually this kind of style with the blue and black banding, or blue and brown banding, is something that goes across to Pueblo weavers, Hopi and Zuni, and Navajo weaving too. So, but I think that in Hispanic weaving, it's very common. There are a lot of old mochis, and everybody loves them. So we still weave lots of them. They're very appealing. The saltillo style is the next style. It is a Mexican textile, but it has very heavy influence on the Rio Grande weaving tradition. You can see that it has a border all the way around, although the Rio Grande saltillos would drop the bottom border. But the border all the way around is the way the original saltillos are. A very detailed background design, usually vertically oriented, sometimes a radiating diamond. The radiating diamond is the center diamond. And this piece and most of the Mexican saltillos, these classic Mexican saltillos, are very, very finely woven. Probably took, I'm sure, a minimum of a couple of years to weave. Or yeah, probably. Anyhow, they're very finely detailed, and it just would have been a very, very slow process. I think that they made a huge impression on me as soon as I started weaving. Actually, on our honeymoon, I got to see these saltillos, a show of saltillos, and I think I've loved these things ever since. The Rio Grande saltillos are a lot simpler. So again, we've lost the horizontal border, so it's not going all the way around. These are just stripes. And in this case, we're emphasizing that vertical background design, but we still have a vertical border. This one has the diamond and the vertical border. So we've put the diamond back. This again is a Rio Grande Saltillo. You'll notice on these, I didn't mention, they're 2 pieces seamed. That's how you get the wider width to make something big enough for a blanket. I didn't mention that the looms, the historic looms, Rio Grande looms, couldn't be made more than about 24, 25 inches wide because of the lack of metal in New Mexico. So there are, if you had to make a reed out of reed, then it's not as sturdy, it's not as strong. So so you have to, the looms are narrow, and that means that to get a piece big enough for a blanket, you either have to do the double weave like we did for the stripes, or 2 pieces seamed like this has. Here's another one. This one has this peculiar long fringe, and there are people who say that it isn't actually New Mexican, but it's very much the right kind of design. So it has mostly that vertically oriented background design and the diamond in the middle. So it's the format of Saltillo that we'll come back to, because my piece now kind of has that same kind of format. The next style is the Vallero style. The Vallero comes out of the sort of American territorial period and before, American, I don't know, influence on the area. So it would go back into the Mexican period as well. This has, what defines it are the 8-pointed stars. So it has 5 8-pointed stars, 1 in each corner, 1 in the center. That's the most typical orientation. There are some pieces that have a lot more smaller pieces. Also very common to this, and I want to point this out, these hourglasses. The hourglass chains separate the 2 colors. And that's very common in these. It's typical of them. And that is also relevant to the piece I'm weaving now. So the vertically oriented border is still here, and these corner elements are there. So again, this is another Vallero. This is more hand spun, not such a great match down the center, but they call it a culebra for the border design. And in this case, it's really easy to see the hourglass chains dividing the one color from the next. This also has, and the last one had a lot of this banding in the whatever, in the color area. So that's a fairly common thing. This one has a different kind of background design without the hourglass chain, but these detached kinds of elements that aren't attached to each other. So I think of them as kind of floating elements, but we have the same thing, the 5 8-pointed stars. This is an interesting Vallero where I don't know what they did to that. They blew up that center star. But it goes, this is where Vallero is actually being done in the Chimayo period. So this is the same yarns that we use now. The Chimayo design starts in Santa Fe, actually. The Curiosity Shop, Jake's Curio Shop, or whatever it is, down on San Francisco Street, right? The shop with the ox cart on the roof, which there's always been an ox cart on the roof, apparently. That's kind of where our industry starts. The weavers who had been weaving all these blankets here in Chimayo get switched to this commercial yarn and selling it to the weavers, the dealers in Santa Fe, who then are Jake Gold, in Santa Fe, who then is selling it to a budding tourist industry in Santa Fe, which grows and changes over time. And eventually the dealers, the weavers in Chimayo take up their own whatever lead, take the bit and do it themselves and start selling it all over the place. But this is one of those really early ones that if you look at the pictures, there's pictures of these associated with the Candelario and Jake Gold's shop down in downtown Santa Fe. So this is another one of those really early Chimayo pieces, different format, but you can see that it's starting to take that Saltillo diamond and put the emphasis in the center there. We've got these other designs in the field, in the background. This is a little bit more of what a Chimayo kind of settles on. So we have two stripes and a center design. When there's more room, you have room for secondary designs and sometimes even more so small designs in between. The Thunderbird, it takes on some interesting sort of little iconography from all over the place, including Native American ideas like the Thunderbird. But I didn't want to spend a bunch of time talking about the Chimayo. That's usually my focus, but I wanted to move on to our COVID times. This piece was on the loom and I was just finishing it up when we closed down. So I finished this piece. I called it Very Vallero. It's on the wall in here, right over there in the corner. And I finished that piece and then I had no idea what I was going to do. So I think this piece is really, it's both very traditional and kind of not. It's a little bit more complex. I did use the hourglass chains to divide colors, and then I used these little loopy things, which I really had a good time weaving. But anyhow, I was just finishing it up. I think I finished it up like 4 days after we closed. And then what happened was I had a ton of yarn that's leftover stuff from a bunch of different things. And I started sorting that out. And but I still had no idea what I wanted to weave with it. Emptying spools is one of my challenges in the business, and I've always been the person to, I don't know, enjoy taking that on kind of. So I had organized them and then I just left them. I had no idea what to do with them. And what I did was go, oh, well, we can't open the shop. So I'm going to go home and I'm going to work on my my knitting machines, and I'm going to learn double bed jacquard, which has been a really long-term goal for me. And I don't want to get into that and I can't tell you why it's so incredibly hard for me to do. I still haven't mastered it, but I spent about, 3 days or something trying double bed jacquard, and I was convinced I'd have plenty of time to get that done. But then a friend of mine is the Health and Human Services person for Rio Grande County, and she put the call out for mask making. We need to make masks because we can't get them, and so they started buying fabrics and then delivering them out to a bunch of us who were making masks. I fell for this, I guess, because I have sewing machines and I have bias tape. Like I have so much bias tape because we make vests. So I took to sewing them. I spent about 3 months just sewing masks, and it was a great focus for my energy and my anxious energies. And I did like I said, I did about 1,600 masks for donations. So months of mask making, and then we were obliged to open the shop back up again. But we didn't want to let people come here into the shop, so we set up a tent outside. And I knew at that point when we knew that we were going to be able to open up, that I would have to make masks to sell, which made some sense. Like, oh, now I got some skills here. Let's make some masks to sell. So anyhow, we got this tent, which was one of those pop-up tents that did not fare well in weather. So we wound up replacing that tent. I think it lasted maybe 2 months. And we bought this second tent, which is actually a carport. Anyhow, my recommendation is the carport. So when Nicolasa came here to buy stuff, the masks that I had were probably looked more like what's on this table. That was the first group of masks that I made. I was doing some from hand woven fabrics. These are fabrics that I had on hand that was my weaving. I don't do a lot of very fine fabrics, so I still don't have much of that. And then I wound up buying fabric to make into masks. So this is actually pretty much the current setup that we have down below here. And I've been buying fabrics that look more like stuff that we'd weave, and making them. And I still have lots of those. The hand woven ones that we have now are hand woven fabrics by Lee Alexander, who is an employee of ours, and we represent her stuff on consignment. And these were fabrics that she let me cut up and make into masks. So my masks have a pocket inside, so you can put your filter fabric or filter material inside, and which is much more critical for these hand-woven fabrics, and some of the lighter fabrics like this one, which is a bandana fabric, is real light. But most of them, I've been trying to get some really good cotton fabrics that are tightly woven and safe. And I've designed them to get the best possible fit. I've done it's a pleated design. It has, and I've made them as adjustable as possible, although there's some variation in width. So anyhow, the other thing that I did was this thing, which is, I did a video to try and sell the masks, which hasn't happened a whole lot, but so you can tell that's very short. It was for social media, but I really, the idea was to connect it to the place, connect the masks to this place. All those pictures were taken out at Ghost Ranch, which is the last place I've ever gone. Anyhow, we spent like a weekend, or we spent 3 days, I guess, out there at Ghost Ranch last February. So anyhow, I'm feeling very fond of the place now. Another thing that I did was take all the scraps from all the mask making, and it probably took me about a week to do the piecing on this thing. And I put this together. You can tell here, I took this before I sewed on that last seam, but this is a king size bedspread, and someday I will quilt it up. Or I don't have a quilting sewing machine. Mine are kind of regular machines, so it's a future thing. I might rent a machine that's capable of doing it. I don't know. I've got covers for our bed, so I don't really need it, but I was really proud of having done this. It was a fun project, and it's from all these different fabrics that had been, most of them, the vast majority of them were donated fabrics that I had been, you know, there'd be these that I had been working from, and then these were just leftovers. Later on, they wound up just giving me stuff that was already cut, which was even better. But anyhow, these were all kinds of leftovers. And so once I had done that, I was finally thinking, oh, I know how to use these things. And I had ideas in my head. So I started with the border, and I started with houses. I wanted to have all the windows and doors shut, because I think that the predominant experience that we have had is feeling like we're locked inside our houses. Now, I want to say that we're really lucky because we've got lots of outdoors and we've got more than one building to hang around in. So I think that I don't want to complain about this, but I know that that's the basic experience that most people have had. And so is this, and I wanted a really universal, I wanted to talk about those universal things of how we're experiencing COVID. So I did that. But when I started on this, I was thinking, I want the corner elements. And remember, we talked about the Valleros having these corner elements of the stars in the corner, but I wanted the four corners to have open doors. So these are the only open doors, and so far I've only woven two because I haven't gotten to that top border, but and I wanted that because I was thinking of this quote, although I finally looked up the actual accurate quote, but about one door, when doors open, when doors close, others open. And it doesn't, it's still, I think even with the vaccine, it's hard to see those doors opening. But I think that this is a valuable quote, and I never saw the whole thing. I also think it's really ironic that it's Alexander Graham Bell, because this telephonic whatever, I think that's the only reason we're all, I don't know, surviving being isolated from one another, is because we get to communicate. So anyhow, when one door opens, when one door closes, another opens. But we often look so long and regretfully upon the closed door that we do not see the one which is open for us. So that mysterious future that we don't know is still out there. Anyhow, I had a vague sense of that even when I started this. So the border also has these vertical houses. So it's a little bit more like I always think of it as a giant apartment building and building on the sides, but every one of them is a little different. Every house is a little different, and it has this zigzag that happens. The doors are zigzagging from one side to the other. This is the first of the little COVID viruses that I did. It took me a long time to figure out what I wanted to do with this. And I think that for some reason, the little viruses were the most intimidating thing for me. But once I got them going, they aren't that hard to do. They do wind up having quite a few. There's 1, 2, 3, there's 5 spools just in this one. It's like 1.5 inches or 2 inches or something. So if you have a lot of them going, it's kind of complex, but that's the basic virus. Another component is the masks. Obviously, I had to put masks. I wanted to have the masks connect one to the other to serve as a border, just the way the hourglass chains did. I've got mask chains, so they're serving as a border from one color to the other. Zoom heads. It occurs to me now that this is kind of dumb because but I found this really great image. I wanted it in the slideshow, but so the Zoom heads are in here. And another thing that's in here are people waiting in line. And I actually had started weaving the people waiting in line before I found this picture, but this is exactly what it looks like. And then the hospital is at the center of the piece. I also put in these tents. I know that tents are being used I mean, we aren't the only people using big white tents, but people are using tents for doing their food distribution to people in need. There's people doing tents for testing. I think that when I went to get a test, that it was in that kind of situation. So I think tents are a big part of sort of this experience that we're all having. I put in an ambulance over here on one side of the hospital and the morgue truck on the other, which is one of the more depressing parts of it. There's what I think of as the universal driveway up to hospitals, but I'm sure it's just because both St. Vincent's and the hospital here in Espanola have something kind of like that. So, and a little tiny bit of landscaping. But I thought the hospital is at the center of the piece, and I think that's really an important thing. And on top of the hospital, these are people waiting in line to get a vaccination. And I still might fiddle with some of these things. I think that green color is kind of quiet, and I might embroider an outline on the vaccinator. Anyhow, and then waiting in the waiting room after getting their vaccination. So this actually, obviously, I didn't do that long ago, and I had to ask, well, they are making people wait after they get the vaccinations, right? So I was assured that you had to wait 15 minutes. And so I thought that was an important aspect of this sort of universal thing. And then I can show you where it is now, I think. So it's just on the loom behind me. It's not showing up very well, is it? I could probably take this off of here and show it to you. So this is where the piece is now. That's the center is where the hospital is, and you can see the border going up. What I didn't mention is that it's the COVID, this thing is tethered, so I can't really do a whole lot about that. But the little masks are always between the where all the viruses are and where the people are. And I thought that was an important aspect of it. It also occurred to me that it's really important that the hospital is out there kind of isolated away from everything else. And I think that it's about that we're now really conscious of that space, all that space, that we need this room, the space around us to feel safe. And I think that the hospital is that sort of last line of safety for all of us. That we're, anyhow, if we get that illness, that's the thing that could keep us from dying. And I'm an asthmatic, so I sort of understand that need for air and that desperation about that. So when I put the hospital in, it's actually probably the easiest thing that I did, the easiest to weave thing that goes on in the whole piece. So I think that's important. Yeah.
I don't want to interrupt you, but if you stop the screen sharing and maybe show the piece again, folks can see it a little larger.
Better. Okay. Let's see if I can get there. I forgot that this is a tethered camera, and I didn't do this on my phone, but that's not bad. That actually looks pretty good. So yeah, I don't know if you guys have questions about it. I'd love to be able to show you the top too. Can you, it's actually difficult. So I've pulled the spools back, but you can see what spools are in motion right now. I'm starting in on, I'm on the next to the last thing of viruses. So I don't know, the blue, the turquoise part is the next to the last. So I don't know. I'm really glad that I got to talk to you about this. I can't tell you how exciting this piece has been for me. I rarely have anything to say about my pieces. Like they're not communicating anything other than, gee, I'm having a great time weaving, and isn't this a fun thing for me to do? This is the first time I really, maybe not the first time, definitely not the first time, but I really feel like I put more meaning and this was just something that I sort of had to say. So anyhow, thank you for the advice, and that's pretty much it. All right, thanks. Bye.
I take care.